The clinking of silverware against porcelain echoed faintly in the dining room. A warm golden glow from the chandelier spilled across the mahogany table, illuminating the steaming dishes my mother had so carefully prepared. It should have been the picture of a perfect family dinner, but for me, it was yet another battlefield. My sister, Eliza, sat at the head of the table like a queen. She was radiant, her flawless hair cascading in waves, her tailored dress hugging her in all the right places. Every word she spoke seemed to sparkle with importance, and every gesture carried the grace of someone who had always known she was adored. My parents watched her with glowing pride, nodding eagerly at every word she said. And then there was me. I sat quietly, my fork barely touching the food on my plate. I had news that day. Good news. I had just gotten a promotion at work, one I had fought tooth and nail for, often staying late at the office while my friends enjoyed their evenings. It was proof that I was more than the shadow my parents kept me in. So, when I finally gathered the courage to speak, my voice was soft but steady. "Mom, Dad, I got promoted today." For a brief second, I thought the words would matter. My chest swelled with a small hope that maybe, just maybe, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Eliza. But my father's response cut sharper than a knife. He didn't even glance up from his plate. "That's nice, dear." Then, turning to Eliza, his tone lifted with warmth. "But Eliza, how was your conference in Paris? Did everyone love your presentation?" Eliza smiled, her voice lilting with pride as she detailed her trip, and my mother clapped her hands together in delight. And then it came, the words that would brand themselves into my memory forever. "You're not half the woman your sister is." My mother said casually, almost as if she were commenting on the weather. "You should learn from her." The words echoed in my mind, louder than the ticking clock on the wall. My hands trembled as I set my fork down. My throat tightened, and my chest ached with a fury I had long tried to bury. I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound sharp and startling in the silence that followed. "I've had enough," I whispered, though my voice carried across the table with a strength I didn't know I had. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't stay. I left that night with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. The air outside was crisp, the world dimly lit by street lamps, but for the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from the suffocating comparisons, the constant judgment, the invisible chains that had kept me small. But freedom came with a cost. The first months were brutal. I moved into a shabby apartment where the walls were thin, and the ceiling leaked when it rained. I worked double shifts at a bookstore to pay rent while finishing an online degree. Many nights, I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made a mistake. I missed having a family, even if it was one that never really saw me. Yet, every time I remembered my mother's words, "You're not half the woman your sister is," I found new strength. Those words became my fuel, my silent fire. I studied harder, worked longer, and built connections with people who truly valued me. One kind manager at the bookstore, Mrs. Whitman, saw potential in me. She encouraged me to apply for better jobs, to network, to believe that I was capable of more. Step by painful step, I began to rise. I remember the first time I was invited to speak at a professional seminar. Standing on that stage, looking out at an audience who respected me for me, I felt something I had never felt at home, pride. I wasn't just surviving. I was building a life, and while my parents had thrown me away, convinced I was destined to be nothing, I was quietly proving them wrong. Years passed. The timid, overlooked girl I once was had become unrecognizable. I had carved out a name for myself in the business world, leading projects, mentoring young women, and earning the respect of colleagues who admired my resilience. My once shabby apartment was replaced by a modern penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The woman staring back at me in the mirror now wore tailored suits, carried herself with confidence, and had eyes that no longer begged for validation. But as I rose, I couldn't help but notice the cracks forming in the world I had left behind. Eliza, the golden child, had married a wealthy banker, but wealth doesn't guarantee happiness. Whispers of her husband's infidelity reached me through mutual acquaintances. Their perfect marriage was a facade, unraveling thread by thread, and my parents, the last I heard, My father's business had taken a devastating hit, investments gone wrong, debts piling up. The once proud family who had boasted about their social standing was now struggling to maintain their lifestyle. I watched from a distance, never reaching out. Part of me wanted to extend a hand to show them that I was not the cold-hearted daughter they believed me to be. But another part, the part that remembered every cruel comparison, every dismissive glance, kept me still. Why should I rescue those who never saw my worth? The irony was delicious. The daughter they had dismissed, neglected, and belittled was thriving. The daughter they had worshipped was crumbling. And soon, fate would bring us face to face again. It was a cold winter evening when I received the invitation. My parents were hosting a family dinner, this time not in their lavish home. They had sold it years ago, but in a modest house they now occupied. The irony was not lost on me. At first, I considered ignoring it. But something in me stirred. This was my moment, not just to face them, but to show them the woman I had become. When I arrived, the look on their faces was priceless. My mother's eyes widened at the sight of me, polished and poised. My father cleared his throat awkwardly, his gaze dropping in discomfort. Eliza, though still beautiful, carried the weight of exhaustion and bitterness in her eyes. Dinner was tense. They tried to pretend everything was normal, but the air was thick with unspoken words. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "You've changed," she said softly, almost grudgingly. I smiled. "Yes, I have." My father's voice was weaker than I remembered. "We heard about your company, the awards, the success." I leaned back in my chair, mirroring the moment years ago when I had pushed my chair back in defiance. This time, though, my heart was steady. Yes, I built it from the ground up, without anyone's help. The weight of my words settled over them. For once, they had no response, no comparison to Eliza, no dismissal of my accomplishments. Just silence. Eliza's fork clattered against her plate. Her voice cracked as she muttered, "It should have been me." I looked at her, not with anger, but with a quiet strength. "No, Eliza, it was always meant to be me. You just never noticed." The room fell silent again, the truth undeniable. I didn't shout, didn't gloat, didn't throw their cruelty back in their faces. My revenge wasn't in words. It was in the undeniable reality of who I had become. As I stood to leave, I glanced back one last time. They sat in silence, drowning in the bitter taste of regret, and with a calm smile, I walked away, finally free,